Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd like to welcome Dr. Susan Baumgaertel. Thank you for joining us today, Susan.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Oh, and I'm so happy to have you. So I always start by saying how we met, and you're one of the first doctors that I connected with. And so way back on April 1st, like I think that's probably the day that I started connecting with doctors. So I think you're like one of the originals. And on LinkedIn, I sent you a message saying I like your tagline, advocate for patients, ally to colleagues, that I share that mission. And I've appreciated your posts on Kevin MD as well, because I had recognized your name. And you must have been on LinkedIn because you got right back to me and we just started chatting back and forth and getting to know each other a little. And then you suggested that we switched over to email commuting and communicating, and you had said you'd be happy to Zoom someday. It would be fun to collaborate. So we did that. And I remember that day, I think we talked for like an hour and I felt like we could have talked all day. So it's nice to have a real conversation with you again. Um, and then in June, it was suggested to me to write a piece for the layperson to understand the challenges physicians are also facing. And I quoted you in it, and then you helped me edit it, and then Kevin MD published it. And that's was this the struggle is real for patients and doctors. So that was fantastic that we did that. And since then, we've periodically communicated through our LinkedIn posts and those of our mutual doctor friends. So by way of introducing you from your bio, I'll share a little bit and then you can share some yourself. Let's see. Dr. Susan Baumgaertel is an internal medicine physician with over 30 years of clinical experience. In 2020, she launched Menopause Menu, a free informational website providing nourishing support for menopause and beyond. 2021 started a new chapter as she stepped away from direct patient care and founded a novel telemedicine business model, MyMD Advocate. She uses her extensive medical experience and expertise to serve patients by providing medical consultation and advocacy support. She published her first book, The Menopause Menu, in 2023, an all-in-one gift book, medical guide, and recipe book for navigating menopause, and I have it right here.
Woo!
So, okay, all right. Matching copies. So today we'll be talking about some takeaways from your book for anyone, regardless of gender or age. And we'll see where the conversation goes. And I have no doubt it will be interesting and fun for everyone. So, what would you most like our audience to know about you as we begin our conversation?
Well, first of all, this was a great trip down memory lane.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to tell everyone my voice doesn't normally sound this creaky and raspy, but I've had surgery recently. And so hopefully everyone can understand me okay. But really, I think, I kind of peeled away from traditional clinical medicine after 25 or more years and, started my own business, my MD Advocate, because I really felt that it was important for me to still stay connected and be of service to patients. But in a way, I was kind of creating a triangle. I wanted to also help my colleagues, be an ally to my colleagues. And so this kind of model doesn't necessarily exist that well, especially in private practice or in big group practice or the corporatized industry. And so I felt like I was being even of better service in this way to help my patients who are frustrated, right? They're frustrated by maybe not being able to have access to their care, or having docs who know them because maybe they're too rushed or they don't get in to see them. And just kind of all the hoops and all the hurdles that we all know exist when it comes to accessing care. And so I felt like, wow, I can really offer my services because I have so many connections and so much understanding of the systems, and help do the handshakes, help fill those gaps, help be there for people who, when they really needed it, not 6 weeks later, because that's when your next visit is. No, mine's like 2 hours from now. So it was just so humbling and gratifying to be there in this way, and to kind of be that little, good woman Friday for, the docs who are in the trenches, who are super busy, who don't have time. And so I think to me, that was a great way to kind of start this next journey of my career.
Oh, well, that's terrific. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's great. It sounds like a great match.
Yeah.
Okay. So as we're getting into our conversation about your book, there was a few things I wanted to share. And one of them is last week I interviewed Dr. Sue McClellan-Tolbert. And during our conversation, she described coaching as a gentle, thoughtful partnership. And I just love that. And that has certainly been my experience with my coach, Dr. Michael Hirsch, who you know. And I thought of that phrase when thinking about how to describe your book. And I would say that after reading it, that you'll want to take better care of yourself in a kind way. And I feel like you're not knocking anyone over the head or strong arming them or dictating what they should do. And it feels more like a kind, gentle suggestions where you can feel good about any steps that you take to make improvements in your life, even baby steps. And as you know, Dr. Bryce Bowers has been sharing his TikTok videos on LinkedIn where he's discussed topics such as physicians needing to address their basic needs, things they tell their patients to do, yet often end up neglecting themselves, like healthy eating and exercising. So I thought that we could start by talking a little bit about exercising. And I love the suggestion you share in your book about keeping hand weights nearby. So even if you have 5 minutes in between Zoom calls that you can get some reps in, as strengthening exercises are so important. So the last thing I would add before we get to my question for you is that given that this book was written for a general audience, a doctor or a physical therapist reading it might laugh and think, yeah, right, I have a hard enough time finding 5 minutes to go to the bathroom or eat lunch. So I'm curious, what worked for you when you were treating patients in person? How did you fit exercise into your life as a busy physician?
Great question. And I think the first thing I think of is I've really moved away from that term exercise and instead chose the word movement because many people feel the exercise is like a punishment or like, oh God, I don't have an hour and a half to go do at the gym. I don't feel like it today, or I'm not up for it. But movement, like we move our body all day long, right? So, example, in my previous workplace, when I lived in a huge building, 9 floors and so forth, and we have photocopiers, right? And okay, if you're photocopying something, it takes 5 minutes, do some squats,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or at home around the corner down the hallway. In my home office here, I have a floor mat, I have some hand weights, and I have a ball, and I have some, bands, so you don't need an hour. You can do it for
Mm-hmm.
5 minutes and 10 minutes, and I think that is so much more doable. And when you kind of frame shift or think of it that way, then of course we can do it all day long or much of the
Mm-hmm.
day. And it's not like a big task. And I think that was kind of some of the flavor that I had in writing my book, is that I tried to assume like a conversational tone and
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, uh, um, let's think about things in a holistic way, not in a militaristic do this or else.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I think it invites people to really kind of look at their own lifestyle. Maybe someone is training for a marathon or loves to go
Mm-hmm.
pound it out the gym. And the only thing they want to do is a Peloton for 60 minutes and sweat it out. That's fine. But
Right.
not everyone does that. And so it just invites a better, more kind of supportive conversation.
Right. No, that's terrific. And I think it's important to say that in the doing those things, like it doesn't have to be all or none. And some people, if you're a high achiever, a type one, or you might think, well, I had to get the benefits, I have to be, lifted, bench pressing, whatever, 100 pounds or
Uh,
something. But that if you can't get to the gym, these things can still make a difference. You still could do body resistance exercises. You can still get some stretching in. You can still get a little cardio in, with jumping jacks or whatever, things like that. So I think that's really important to say that those things shouldn't be understated. It's not negligible.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, and my next question is in regards to eating healthy. I was wondering if you have any top tips for busy physicians.
Wow, that's a drum roll moment. I think all of us come from different backgrounds in terms of what we feel food is to us. Some people just eat because they have to, others are starving, others feel it as nourishment, others love to cook and create. And so when you kind of put it all together in a bow, we come very differently. And so I would never just kind of say this is how you do it. But I think, again, when I was thinking about my book, there are many things that resonated for me. And in fact, I kind of playfully and artfully linked a recipe with each symptom in menopause. Again, men can do this. You don't have to go through menopause. But when you think about things that you enjoy, maybe dishes that have more protein, or, we should have more vegetables, right? Things that you can create, not instead of shoulda, coulda, woulda, but like, oh, this is delicious. I love this. It's nourishing. A good example, in fact, it's kind of like a little twist on, what to eat, was my chapter on sleep disruption. And, I've had other podcasts where people say, like, what's the recipe for that one? And it was a hash brown crust veggie quiche. And they like, I'm not making that before bed. Are you kidding? And I said, like, read the fine print. Well, the fine print was, well, if you actually make it batch cook on a weekend, and then you cut it up in pieces, put in your fridge or freezer, and you take it out in the morning, perhaps you've had a really poor night's sleep. Maybe if you're a doctor, you're on call, or you're busy, or you're just exhausted. Well, then you can just pop it in the microwave. In a minute and a half, you got your lovely quiche that you've made yourself, and that's really nutritious. And oh yeah, it has some protein punch in it. So, I think that those are the little tricks I think that we need to do more of. And it's also a more forgiving way, instead of like a prescription, like you have to eat this. It's a more experiential way of like, oh, this really matches my lifestyle.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. So how did you select which recipes to include in the book?
Well, in many different ways. There are a couple of recipes I knew right off the bat I wanted in. There are some recipes I just love the picture. I thought, oh, I've got to incorporate this somehow. And then, if anyone's ever done publishing or self-published, and I self-published this, if you look at what it costs to hire a food photographer, and actually that's just not it. Like someone who stages the food and then photographs the food, I thought, like, I only have 16 food pictures, and it was going to be about 10, 12, 15, like $1,000. I thought, this
Oh
is
my
nuts.
God.
This is
Okay.
absolutely crazy. I thought, well, I can take pictures of food. They may not look as sexy and perfect as those Bon Appetit magazine, but I got the idea, and I thought, like, no, I want something different. And I also wanted a bit more, my version, and more relatable, because you know what? When you open a recipe book that looks so good, half the time, like, the food looks so great, like, I can't cook that. You want something maybe a little bit more like, oh, I can do that. That was part of my approach.
Okay. Oh, that's great. No, I thought the pictures were really good. So a few, other than the quiche recipe that you mentioned, a few other ones. If people wanted to preview what's in there, the Japanese styled pickle cucumber, I might try that. And I have Brussels sprouts almost once a week, so the Brussels sprout salad look good. The garden veggie pasta, that Japanese style fried rice with salmon. And then, of course, for dessert, the apricot and cherry cake.
Love it. Yeah. So again, when you think about recipes, is that apricot cherry cake healthy in the whole word of that word healthy? No, it's not healthy, because when you think about healthy, you're not thinking about, oh, I want sugar and fat and flour, and no, of course not. But that recipe, actually, it's based on a recipe of Pflaumenkuchen, which is plum cake, from my childhood memories and my German grandmother's background. Well, when that's paired with a recipe on cancer, and when you think about someone who has cancer, they can be overwhelmed. I mean, there's so many other adjectives that come to mind. Well, what about a recipe that invokes beauty? Because it's beautiful to look at this, that torch or the cake.
Yeah.
And then something that perhaps, like for me, is a beautiful childhood memory, and something that is so delicious, because maybe, especially people who might be going for chemo or radiation or other treatments, and maybe their taste is off and they can't, things aren't quite the same. And so I don't think they're going to want like a protein powder shake that probably tastes like cardboard, something that is beautiful and that is nourishing in a different way, not just in terms of micronutrients. So that to me was also an important recipe to include, because I think we have to redefine, what's nutritious, right?
Right. And very similar, when I had a friend going through chemo, she wanted banana bread all the time. Like, that's what kind of did it for her, was banana bread. Yeah. So as we were talking about photos, how did you select which photos to include? Because each chapter, not only does it have a recipe photo, but there's also a photo introducing the chapter. And when I got to the Garden of the Gods in Colorado Springs, I had been there in 2019, and I loved it. That was a really cool place. So how did you select the photos?
Well, the photos were meaningful to me. I'm a photo buff. Not just saying I'm not a professional photographer, but of course everyone has a phone these days, right? And I have 5 million pictures. And my mother was an artist. I grew up with art everywhere, and so I have an artist eye, and I like to think I have that still. But I'm quickly paging to two pictures, which I think were amazing. And one of them is this. Show up for the
Yep. Oh yeah, that
and
was
so
pretty. Yep.
changing and ending periods. Like, I took this picture
Mm.
years ago before I even
Wow.
went to, and it was in the fall, of course, and it was this Japanese maple, and of course, a lot of the leaves had fallen. And I took it because it's so vibrant and beautiful. But you look, it's like it kind of makes you think about periods, right? I mean, in a funny way. And then, of course, one of my favorites, which actually is not my photo, but my husband's photo, was the photo on, oh God, where is it here? It's on Libido. And that one, I've lost it, but that was a picture of the, oh, here it is,
Oh yeah.
the
Actually,
Blue Angels.
I live
And you
near
get the idea.
Newburgh. I live near Newburgh. I grew up in Newburgh and
Yeah,
Stewart Airport. They fly out, I think, around Labor Day. So I've seen
yeah.
that. So that
Yeah.
was very
So
cool.
these pictures had meaning to me, and I thought they were good photographs. Again, I didn't hire a professional photographer at all. And I know when I set out to do the book, it was going to be a little expensive for me. But people go on vacations; they spend money on fancy trips, or a boat, or
Hmm.
a car, or a vacation home, or hockey equipment for their kids. We spend money on things. I thought, you know what? I'm going to spend money on this book for me because
Hmm.
I wanted the look and the feel a certain way. And so I was really
Hmm.
very, very happy when it came out.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's good. Yeah, that's terrific. Another part of your book I wanted to talk about was body image. And I loved it, the part where you said accept it, or ignore it, or get plastic surgery. And basically you can, I've heard the same advice about jobs or anything really. There's only three things you can do. You can accept your situation, you can try to change your situation, or you get out of there and do something else, right? So that, even though you were specifically talking about body image, that
Yeah.
really relates to anytime you're having a struggle with something. Those are really only the three options. And instead of keep stewing about the problem or whatever that you do have, uh, choose one of those things.
Oh, that is so true. And I think that body image is a very complex, very personal, very emotional driven subject for many men and women alike. But this book, of course, was geared more toward women. And, when you think about it, there are cultural precedents, there's familial, how you grew up, there's what your body size and shape is, what your height is, even, different cultures in terms of what's standard. And dare I bring in, evoke Hollywood, and the awards are on tonight. But I think that there's so much chatter and background noise when it comes to body image. Imagine when you have an illness, or something that is not just disfiguring, but affecting you. You're fatigued, or you're feeling like you're throwing up all the time, or something that is altering you physically. There's the impact is also there for body image. And I think if we can pull back a little bit and learn some techniques that allow us to just love our bodies. I mean, it sounds like a self-love fest, but it is, instead of, unfortunately, younger girls are doing this too often now, comparing themselves to others, this goes well past, puberty and well into adulthood. And some women who are still 65, 75 still,
Right.
are wishing they were better. And I think we just need to get away from that visual and understand, first of all, what is healthy.
Mhm.
Health doesn't mean you're stick thin. I think someone who's stick thin is probably unhealthy.
Right.
So
Well, I like what you say. Be happy that you have a body, rejoice in the parts you like, learn to accept and validate the other parts, and focus on inner strength, inner beauty, and inner wisdom. And that might sound kind of like woo or whatever, like, yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'd like you to speak to that in a sentence or to whatever, like, because that actually is important. Instead of just saying, yeah, 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 like really take that to heart. What would you have to add?
Well, I would say it really does come into that inner wisdom. And I use that a lot in different circles. As a woman who is well past menopause, I have a wisdom that I didn't have when I was 20 something, 30 something, 40 something, whatever something. And everyone's going to kind of hit that at a different age. Maybe you're wise at 35 because you have four kids. I didn't.
Mhm.
Maybe you're not wise until you're 75. So I think that is a strength that people can tap into, and that becomes your true north. That becomes something that can guide you when it comes to illness or professional challenges, career changes, all those things. And I think that's really something to cultivate.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And another sentence you said is stop listening to your personal criticisms because they are usually not true and are rarely kind. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Oh, every woman listening, we are our own worst inner critic. I mean, honestly, I think I started the thing off, that chapter off, or one of the paragraphs. So, when's the last time you stood in front of a mirror looking at yourself
Mhm.
naked? Like, who does that, right? But if you did, the first thing is like, oh, I don't like that little fold here. Like, oh, this is saggy, or I have wrinkles, or oh, this is too fat. I mean, this criticism is ridiculous. We don't need it. We wouldn't do that for a young child in front of us. Of course we wouldn't. We wouldn't do that to our best friend unless you're joking around. So why we do that to ourselves is very harmful. And I think if we get away from that, things can be so much easier.
Right. I agree. And I think that even more with men, because it doesn't even have to be about body image, right? And that men do that too, and doctors do that too, right? Personal criticisms. It's usually not true and rarely kind, right? It doesn't have to
Yeah,
stick
yeah.
with
And I
women
think
or body image. It's kind of universal.
professionally, yeah, professionally as a physician, I think I'm learning till the day I die. There's, someone who thinks they know everything. Well, they're not interesting to me because, we
Mhm.
all are all learning. And I think if you have a sense of, humble, if you have some humbleness in you, that makes you a better person, that makes you a better professional. And I think that from a physician's perspective, I really listen to my patients, and I'm very attentive. I think we need to do that. So that comes from understanding
Mhm.
yourself, and kind of mirroring that on others too.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I like another thing you said in that chapter is focus on improving physical fitness, maintaining mental sharpness, managing chronic disease, and being the best steward of your own body. It's not like tape measure measurements or, write anything like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I like the way you said that.
yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so then another thing you said is the importance of ruling out a true medical reason for your symptoms and not automatically assuming this must be a menopause thing or this must be an aging thing. And I think that's really important for anyone, doctors and patients to keep in mind. And I think of my dad died about 6 years ago, but he had had diabetes. He was on dialysis. He had a lot of things. He had lost a kidney, had kidney cancer. He got a kidney, lost that kidney, and then he ended up dying of pancreatic cancer. But when you have diabetes, you could attribute everything to diabetes, right? Because there's so many symptoms you could have with diabetes. So
Right.
if either he and or the doctor weren't astute, and if my dad was complaining of symptoms that were actually related, this didn't necessarily happen, but it's an example I could can offer that they could have not found the pancreatic cancer or found it when they did because they were mistakenly attributing everything because he had diabetes.
Yeah, in fact, that was right at the get-go, right at the very beginning when I started to think about writing this book. It was so important to me to convey that message, and you see that in a number of chapters. Because when you think about it, and I'll just talk about women for a moment, where do women get information? Well, many, Dr. Google, dare I ask, that's just not okay usually. There's some reputable websites, of course. They ask their best friend, their friend at work, their aunt, their sister, their mother, and so the information gathering part is questionable. And that also lends to why they're frustrated because they don't always have access to the greatest information. They're at their doctor's appointment. Maybe it's too quick and they haven't even brought up something that's a very sensitive topic. Maybe it's vaginal dryness or who knows what. And so they're left to research on their own. And I thought it was really important because you're exactly right with your diabetes example. When you think about menopause, there's so many symptoms. I mean, the list goes on and on, and so when you think about night sweats, well, guess what? There's some bad things that cause night sweats, like lymphoma or cancer or, hyperthyroidism. So you can't just assume that, oh, this is nothing. If it's trivial, if it happens
Mhm.
once or barely happens, that's one thing. But if something is really affecting you, it's so important to not miss that opportunity to go see your physician and get a physical or get tests. Not that everything has to be done, but to have that dialogue and have their knowledge understand where you're at. Because on the flip side, I have many women who come to me thinking they're dying, for instance, it's
Right.
menopause.
Right, right.
But I can say that not flippantly. I can say that because I have that body of knowledge and I can understand where they're at. And oh yeah, we've already done this and we've done that. And so not to, not to hyper focus on things, but to not to ignore things.
Right, right. And that's important for doctors to hear themselves because recently I was speaking with someone who was married to a physician who was minimizing their own symptoms. Yeah, and and it
Uh,
wasn't something that should have been minimized or brushed aside. So
yeah,
that's important even for doctors, right? Not to
yeah.
minimize your own.
And my hunch, without knowing anything about this person, is that very often physicians will not just minimize, but just like there's no time.
Hmm.
And also, and not that we're all altruistic, but we're busy caring for others, and it's a little harder to put that kind of nurturing into yourself sometimes. So it's a life lesson learned here.
Right, right. Well, and I think since the pandemic, other physicians I think have been writing books or took to writing books, right, or are considering it. So I was wondering if you have any tips for physicians considering writing a book. Any like lessons that you've learned along the way?
Yeah,
Anything?
I would say, and this is my first book that I've ever published. After researching everything, I full circle came back to self-publishing as the way to go. Not because I'm a control freak, but because I wanted it to come out a certain way, and I also didn't want to wait, X number of years. And so I think it's important to, ask around. People can call me up if they want to chat about it. I'm very delighted to because I learned a lot, and I think that it's always going to be investment, either money, time, or both. There's some books that are super simple. You can whip off very quickly and they're just text only, written word, maybe like a memoir or something. But, this book with 34 pictures and all these moving parts and lots of color was very different. So I knew I was kind of biting off a big chunk. And for that reason, I was okay with the fact that it was going to cost me more, and it was more challenging. I'm actually just getting the ebook done right now,
Oh,
professionally. So I'm really excited. It's never going to be an audiobook because of course it's not something you can just read. You have to experience and visualize too. But yeah, so do your research, but talk to others who've written books. I think that's going to be the most helpful for people.
okay. Well, that's terrific. And thanks for your offer. You might be getting some communication there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to share with our audience, like any top tips you have for colleagues from seasoned physicians to medical students or even those considering medical school?
Well, I'd say I don't have any one, top tip, but I'd say that because of the pandemic era, we're kind of frame shifted in a different way. And I think that for students and longtime veteran physicians alike, really take time to pause and understand what's your passion. And if it's not seeming quite the passion it used to be, understand it better and maybe shift. I didn't leave my career, I shifted my career. And I think that was very powerful. And I feel like I can give back even in better ways now. And I also have more time for myself and more time for writing and other things, which I wouldn't have cared of, 20 years ago, but are very meaningful for me now. And so I think people just need to pause and
Hmm.
kind of figure out what they're really valuing.
Right, I would agree with you 100%. I think that's a really
Yeah.
great tip on the fly. Okay, so how would you like our listeners if they wanted to get in touch with you? What's your preferred means of communication?
Yeah, I would say my website is mymdadvocate.com. And if you go to the contact page, it has my email, it has my phone. So all the goodies are there. I'm always very happy to email. I also have a free menopause website called Menopause Menu. I don't really communicate through that. That's more just for information and a whole bunch of blogs. But yeah, if people want to email me or reach out by phone, I'm delighted to chat.
Okay, all right. Well, that sounds great. So thanks again for being my guest today, Susan. It was really good to chat with you again. So hard to believe it was like at least 8 months, right, since our last
I know.
face-to-face conversation.
Time flies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy you had me on, and I love your personal process for helping physicians. I like the title "Stand Up for Doctors,"
Oh,
and I feel that you're so enmeshed in supporting physicians in the medical profession. So I thank you.
oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And so how I end is I say, in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Excellent. Well put. Thank you.
Thanks.